really enjoyed being with you in these sessions. And we would like to begin by acknowledging that we are in Kennesaw, Georgia, in the U.S., in the ancestral and unceded territory of the Salagi people, and we would like to pay our respect to elders, both past and present. I do want to make sure that you can hear me. If you can put your favorite, oh, that's not, I can't, that's not helpful. There is a handout in the chat. So if you want to, yeah, I don't know how I'm going to manage the chat and everything, but Stephen, if you do see anybody who says they can't hear, yeah, thank you.
Okay.
But if you can't hear me because I am talking, please do put your favorite book in the chat, so we'll know that we need to address that. And I'll just keep talking in case you need to test it out. But I'm Dr. Tamara Powell, and I'm a professor of English at Kennesaw State University, and I'm here with Mr. Stephen Bartlett, who is the senior lecturer of history at Kennesaw State here in the Atlanta metro area. Both Stephen and I were at various points the director of the Office of Digital Education in the College of Humanities and Social Sciences here. So we enjoy doing these presentations together. If you were here last time for Stephen's accessibility talk, that is super, it's really his jam. I love listening to it. And so discussion protocols are kind of my jam. And so Stephen has this really cool thing he does called the Virtual Museum. So he's going to share that with us in a little bit. I'll just leave that as like the icing on the cupcake to keep you hanging in. I would like to know who's with us. So if you would please introduce yourself, if you'll share your name, what you teach, and how you use discussion boards. I want to start with Manisha.
Yes, so Manisha from Muscogee's Cultural College. We are a First Nation college located on the reserve. I use discussion boards. I pose a question where I want to see if students are reading the assigned reading, and then I invite other students to post their comments. Or sometimes say if it's about ceremony, then I want to know what ceremonies they're participating. So my question would be, tell me a little bit about the ceremonies which you have attended. Like, what was the protocol? What was the type of ceremony? How was your experience attending that ceremony? Thank you.
And that's really good because they love talking about themselves, or at least I find our students do. So that's a great way to use a discussion board. Andrea?
Andrea is on the chat. She says, hi, y'all. I won't be able to introduce myself today, but I'm a librarian, facilitates online learning opportunities at the public library here in Alberta.
Librarians, they're awesome. Rachel, Rui, is that correct?
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, Rui is my legal name. I am not a teacher at all. I'm a student of social work, but at our presentation time, we do need to use a lot of those tools to make sure everybody has an interactive opportunity to participate in the discussion. So I'm interested in this conversation. Thank you.
Great. Donna?
Good afternoon from the East Coast of the United States. Let's see, my name is Donna Mayer. I am a librarian, but I also teach information literacy courses, and I also teach some music education courses. And I use discussion boards to help drill down and get my learners to think more critically about what they're reading.
Sounds good. Another librarian. We're blessed.
I think it's librarians are the only ones working during the summer. All the faculty are off.
And Shannon.
Good morning. So I kind of do two jobs. I am an instructional designer by day, and I work with an organization called Momentum in Calgary, Alberta, and they provide skills training, entrepreneurship training, and financial literacy to varied individuals. And then my side gig is I'm an instructor at Mount Royal University, and I teach mediation, conflict resolution, and negotiation skills. And so how I use the discussion board, so I'll focus more on my own instructing experience, is for introductions, things like that, but I use it actually quite substantially to submit assignments. I really see the value in, having students share assignment information through the discussion board so the entire class can see it. Now, I'm very mindful of what types of assignments should sit in that type of forum versus those that are submitted kind of one-on-one to me. But I found that students get really engaged when half their assignments are on the discussion board and they have to respond to others as part of their mark. And it just generates this sense of community. So that's primarily how I'm using discussion boards right now.
Sounds good. I actually have recently learned about that from a colleague and I found it very valuable. I was surprised. We're always taught to be so mindful of privacy, but it worked very well. So I know if you don't know about discussion boards, then after COVID, we've all used discussion boards at this point, and students are tired of discussion boards. On the elevator about 6 months ago, I heard a student say, "I didn't pay to just read posts from people who know as little as I do," and so there's a sort of sense that there's no value in this for them. And that's one of the things we want to talk about is how do we make sure that they do feel that there's value, and how do we get more critical thinking and more value out of it. So just some general, like what the research says is that if you respond to discussion board posts, then after the intro board, which if you're in an online class particularly, you do want to have an intro board where everybody introduces themselves. The research says that makes them invest more in the class overall, which increases your student success and your participation. But after that, then respond to 15% every time and not the same 15%. So there's certainly no best practice in responding to every post every time. And faculty work so hard and can really wear themselves out doing that. And there's no research-based benefit. Also, we know now that students don't go back and comb through every discussion post after the assignment has ended. So many faculty respond with a letter saying, dear class, here, these people had really good responses. Here's some things that weren't mentioned that I think you should know. And then maybe if there were some really bad responses with erroneous information that you don't want to work its way into the midterm or a paper, here's some things that were said, but no names mentioned, that let's not continue to say or whatever. I have a faculty member here who makes a video where the names of the students who did well pop up, and that's very motivating for the students. She uses a program called Camtasia. It's not free, but that is a very cool idea. And another faculty member who gives quizzes over the responses or quizzes over the letter that she sends to really punctuate that this discussion board is important. It's not just busy work, which some students feel that it's busy work. And also, of course, you want to have a purpose for each discussion board and make sure that you know what the purpose is. Stephen and I have worked with a lot of faculty in our time in the Office of Digital Education. And, one of the things that sometimes a faculty member would say, well, I know I have to have a discussion every week, which you don't hear. And so we say, well, no. And then would say, well, I just ask them the color of the sky every week or something and just give them all points. And that's how I manage it. And it's like, but why? I mean, that's not even worth your time, So definitely make sure you have a clear purpose. Discussion board prompts should be open-ended. I've also seen people say, questions like, what's 2 + 2? And then what do the rest of the students do? If you have 25 students and one person answers it, then what do the rest of us do? So if you do have a question like, who killed Beatrice in Rappaccini's Daughter by Nathaniel Hawthorne? There's about 5 good answers, right? So you could consider smaller discussion groups where you put 3 students in a group or 5 students in a group. And then that way there is more to talk about. 3 people could say Beatrice committed suicide in that prompt and still have something to say. So you might consider smaller discussion groups. If you have a big class, like I have colleagues who teach 200 students, you might alternate discussion groups. You might say, we're going to break you into 10 students each of you gets a week. And that's it. Everybody gets one discussion board this semester. And that way it's a workable load for you. They get some personal attention and it's not, just out of control and too much work. I'm always about the work-life balance. Another thing that I do here on the right-hand side, I teach graphic design. And so we talk about charts and graphs, and I'll have like 5 students in a discussion group and I'll put the student's name at the top. I'll give them a graph and I'll say, or a chart or some graphic that has a problem. You can see the problem in both of these and ask them to analyze the one with their name on it, post in their discussion, and keep in mind there's 3 to 5 students in that discussion board, and then to help their colleagues if they miss anything or if you have anything to add. And so that way everybody has to talk, they have something specific to talk about, and they don't crosstalk a lot. Students have, you've probably noticed, a formula that they use anytime you ask them to respond, where it's like, name the student, dear Sally, what you liked about it or what the teacher said to say about it. I really enjoyed how you talked about that chart. Some insight. I like charts too. And then some conclusion. I hope you do well in your chart analysis or whatever. And that's it. Like, they have a formula, they throw it up there. So I try to do things to break them out of that formula. I have not found the magic pill yet. If you require responses, like for this, it was like analyze the chart and then talk to someone else about their analysis. I'll usually say, by the middle of the week, you should have analyzed your chart. By the end of the week, you should have made your comment. Or if it's something bigger, by the end of the week, you should have made your initial comment. And then by the end of the second week, you should have responded to 2 colleagues or whatever. So be sure you tell them, so that you have room at the end of the assignment for people to do their responses, if that's part of it. So that's all about, general discussion board activities. We all, I think, are familiar with the post a response and then respond to 2 or 3 colleagues. But let's say this is something, this would be an assignment where you have a discussion board and you want students to be able to identify the basic tenets of transcendentalism. So let's say you teach a gen ed lit class, and you teach 2 weeks on transcendentalism. You know that this is something students don't know anything about. You want them, so your goal is that you want them to identify the basic tenets of transcendentalism. You want them to explain how various quotations from the works you have read reflect those tenets. Basic literary analysis for a gen ed class. So you might take 2 weeks, and the first week do the ungraded self-assessments and learning apps on vocabulary and basic concepts, which once you create the learning apps, you don't have to do anything else. It works on its own. I'm a big fan of that. You sleep that week. And then week 2, save the last word for me, discussion protocol, which will last another 2 weeks, but you can move on to something else, in week 3. You don't have to hang out and wait for them to finish up the discussion board and your content. So the save the last word for me, I'm gonna try to move this a little bit. Probably gonna end up making some hot mess. All right, go over there. All right, the save the last word discussion protocol is really good for having students work with complex reading passages. And there is in the handout that Manisha posted, that some of that handout, if you start reading the beginning, is from the University System of Georgia, and it's a lot of just overview about discussions. It's really great. But I also put about 10 pages of Going Online with Protocols, which is a book that I always have around, in there, along with a cover so you can see it. I hope that's okay with copyright because it's just 10 pages. But it has the instructions for this in detail. So you break students into smaller discussion groups of about 5 or 10. You assign students a reading that you know challenges them, maybe stumps them. You have them post brief passages that intrigued them and that they think might be important to a full understanding of the text. And in this case, I would have given them a lecture the week before where I pulled out those passages and talked about it, you know, so I did a lot of scaffolding, hoping to support this exercise. And then all students reply to at least one other student explaining what they think it means and how it relates to the larger topic or text. So the first post, the student just posts the passage with no comment, and then the other students are asked to respond and try to make the connection. And then the person who posted the original passage comes back and explains why they chose it, what they've learned from reading the reactions, and how they'll apply their new knowledge. So you can see if you had a large class, you might even have half the students post one week and do this, and then maybe with another reading have the other half post, so that you have, you know, not as many posts as students maybe. So it would look kind of like this. So this is from Fuller's Great Lawsuit. The student posted this passage, and then this student did a pretty good job, I thought, of going in and talking about how it related to transcendentalism. So I thought they did a pretty good job. I did feel like I should have set it up more clearly. I should have maybe modeled a couple for them, and then nobody went back. The original poster, none of the original posters went back and like followed up, which I think was the most important critical thinking piece. That didn't happen. So clearly, I think I did not. I'm recommending to you, given the mistakes that I made and what I saw, that you really set this up and help them understand, which some in the handout does help. The USG was actually very good about giving instructions about that I should have followed more carefully. So that's an overview of Save the Last Word for me, which is the one I find most helpful. And I know someone said that they had to do presentations to their colleagues, and this one works face-to-face really well as well. So there's a link there at the teacher toolkit that goes through Save the Last Word for me and talks about it in various contexts. My colleague, Julie Moore, who turned me on to the whole discussion protocol thing, does the Add, Analyze, Apply one, the AAA assignment. She's in our Bagwell College of Education and does have a new book coming out on protocols. So she's got her book proposal accepted, so it'll be a bit, but very excited about that. The other two that I thought were more usable, if you're just starting out with protocols, are the pruning protocol and the Mars-Venus protocol. So I'll talk about some of these briefly, but really, if you are interested, you'll want to dive deeper into the handout. The AAA assignment, again, the clear directions I think is important for all of these. And the professor starts a few conversation threads on the discussion board. So it's a little different. And then students are directed to read the initial conversation starter and any peer responses. And then they find an interesting comment by a classmate and respond. But you've already started, you've already given some conversation starters, so there's a place to start. And then summarize what the person said, share new information from the assigned readings, apply that new information using your critical thinking skills, and analyze what it means to apply to a situation. So you'll probably have to walk them through the assignment and these things they're supposed to do. So it's add, analyze, apply. And then your conversation starters will just evolve into these long discussion threads that hopefully will lead to some really good critical thinking. So that's the AAA. Now the pruning protocol, move this somewhere, I don't know. Oh, I can.
This is my favorite one.
This is your favorite one?
Yeah, I
This
like
is
this one.
hard. This is hard. So this is a commitment. This is a big commitment from you as a faculty member. It's good for a big topic like climate change. I don't know, Stephen, what would be a good topic that you would use it for in history?
Right, like we use it for things like how does religion impact the development of, civilizations or history or something like that, big topics. I agree.
Holy cow. Okay, so you have what you call first growth ideas, where you have students brainstorm solutions to the problem in a full class discussion board. And then you have initial pruning and second growth. If you had a hybrid class, this would work well, or just the next week come back and have them meet in smaller groups, but all the ideas in each smaller group and cut stuff out and prune the ideas. Then second growth forum, one member of each smaller group shares the ideas on the second big discussion board. So you're really working these discussion boards and moving back and forth and having to give very clear instructions. And then if it's a completely online class, and then the second pruning and the final response, you're back in the smaller groups and students are asked, what are the new and bigger ideas do you see in all this second growth and what do you want to prune? And then they go back to a big whole, so this would be an entire, classroom thing that goes on. They go to the whole class discussion board and they're asked how to solve the proposed problem. So you should have had, deeper insights, deeper understanding, deeper discussion, but it is a commitment. This is some work. So again, you'll want to prep your students ahead of time as to how this will proceed. The Mars Venus one, it's kind of weird. It's kind of interesting. So students, you give them a reading assignment, you ask them to read it, you put them in small discussion groups with several quotations from a text that disagrees with the first one read. So this one might, you can see how this would go well with like Irvin Howe versus The World in the Jug, some contrasting lit pieces. Or well, anything you have two sides from. And then students answer the question, how do you think the author of the article would respond to these quotations from the contrasting text? How did the excerpts from the contrasting text either tap or challenge what you take to be the underlying beliefs of the author we read this week? And they should synthesize and post answers to the bigger Mars Venus discussion forum that you've also created. And then reply to at least two other groups' threads stating whether they agree or disagree with the analysis and why. And then each group reads the responses and creates a final response to share with the class. So again, it's a lot of prep, a lot of work, but hopefully gets them to thinking more deeply about something. So there's also kind of a cool thing about using discussion boards for something that maybe you didn't initially think, oh, this is how I would use them for. So I want to turn it over to Stephen and let Stephen talk about the virtual museum, which is another cool discussion thing.
Yeah, I realized a few things about discussion boards as I started to use them because, when I first started using them, I think it was the same thing Tammy was talking about. I just felt like I had to as a way of engagement. But I didn't understand some of the principles about discussion boards. And probably the number one most important principle about a discussion board is you must get the students to buy into the discussion board. If you don't, the discussion board is not going to move along like you want it to. It won't become a discussion. Just as students are bored with a discussion in a classroom and won't participate, they won't participate on the discussion board, or their discussion post won't be very meaningful. So I started trying to figure out how to do this because I have freshmen, usually students who don't really have much knowledge about the world, and I teach world history. So how can I get them to buy into these discussions without having a great deal of knowledge on their own? Because the one thing you want them to do is in buy-in is to share themselves somehow. In other words, to get them to share their opinions, to they do like to talk about themselves or their experiences if they can. Bring it back to their world. If we think about social media and everything, they live in a little microcosm of their own, and that's what they like to work in. So how can we bring these larger things that we're trying to talk about back into their own little worlds? What interests them? So what I went with was something called the virtual museum, where we take each week we're looking at a different civilization, different time period, and the students go out on the internet and they find an image of an artifact from that civilization and time period that really appeals to them, and they bring it in, and that's their museum object. And so we build a room each week, essentially, as they post their objects. And then I split the weeks up so that, especially if I have large classes, I will split it up to where half the students in the class post their objects for that week, And then the other half, and they'll do that by say like Thursday. And then the other half of the students will be the museum goers, right? So they're walking through the museum, and just as in any museum that you go to, you stop at not everything, but certain things catch your eye and you really look at them. So they, pick a couple things that really appeal to them and explain why it appeals to them. So now the ones who post have given us some information about the object, and they post also why they chose that object. And then again, the people who go through and respond with why they were really drawn to the object. So the great thing is I found that it gave me almost instant feedback really on what was going on in the class, because I was finding out what they were picking up from class lectures and materials that they're reading, content that they were bringing into their posts. So that's one of the hard things with online education, is you often don't get that instant feedback that you do when you're standing in front of students. It also allowed them to put things in that maybe they experienced in their own lives. So, I had one student whose mother worked on a project here in Atlanta with restoring the mummy of Ramses the first, and then they sent that back to Egypt. And so she was able to post all these images and these things on there, and the students got really involved with that. And other people post, places they've gone and things like that. So they get to share things about their lives maybe, or just what they like. I find out, what students like jewelry or weapons or music, or, just all kinds of things that you learn through the process. And then what I did, because I can't respond to all of them, like Tammy was saying, I create a video and post it each week. And what I started doing was just kind of reinforcing, picking objects, like 3 things from each museum post that was out there. I would pick 3 of my favorites, and usually there are things that reinforced what we were talking about in class. And so it gave me another point to be able to go back and reinforce. But what I didn't realize is how competitive the students are. And so I do this for both my online and my in-person classes. I have them do the same assignment. And I was coming back to an in-person class one time, and I had been on at a conference, and I came in and gave the lecture and said, okay, we're done for the day, see you next time. And they're like, wait, what about your favorite post from the virtual museum this week? And I said, oh, I'm sorry, I just didn't get to look at it this week yet. They're like, oh man, I really thought you got to go check mine out. You have to see mine. I really think you're going to pick mine this week. So that's when I started realizing that they're getting competitive about, are you going to pick theirs as the one to point out for the week? And students are highly competitive, which gets them even more invested and interested in the discussion. So I think part of the problem with the discussion board mentality that we have right now is we're very pigeonholed into, okay, we present them with a reading, they go in, then we pull that apart, and that's kind of the discussion, and that's how we use it all the time. My suggestion is to think outside the box. There are many different ways that you could use the discussion board that don't have to be that specific. It could be, okay, you've got this, notion of some sort of societal theory. You read about that. Now, have you seen that in the news? How about in your social media? Where do you see that coming through in the social media that you use? Or, something that they don't have to have a great deal of knowledge on, but they can bring in that discussion and they feel involved. So, thinking outside the box, creating alternative ways to use discussion boards that will draw them in. Again, most important thing is to get them to have some buy-in into those discussion boards. Tammy?
Wait, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. Oh, yeah. So thank you. Yeah, that was really great. In fact, I was just thinking we need to write that up. Because it's really great. And a lot of other faculty have been using that strategy at our institution as well. So anyway, in conclusion, really, as you can see, these protocols take a lot of work and energy on your part. They're not easy, but I do think that for weeks when you're working on definitions or memorization, creating ungraded self-assessments for your students to work on is really a time saver, or self-graded quizzes if your learning management system supports that. Crossword puzzles for vocabulary. I just made one the other day on A Doll's House by Ibsen, which helping them work out basic concepts. You might look at classtools.net or learningapps.org. I like Hot Potatoes, which is a Canadian software, yay, which Stephen hates, which it does look very like 1980s, so, but it is accessible. So some cool tools are classtools.net, Miro, Learning Apps, Linoit, Quizzes, and so really that's it, but we are hanging out if you have questions or if you have anything to share. We'd love to hear it, and thank you so much for your kind attention. Y'all okay?
Yeah, I don't. Let's see. I was checking. Yep.
Shannon has a question or a comment.
Yeah, I just was wondering if you played at all with awards or badges linked to discussion boards as a motivator, or as you said, Stephen, like some students are very competitive, and have you played with any of that, or do you know of anything related to that? I'm just starting to think about that for my own. So
I like it. We do badges for some of our shorter workshops, or we did, but we had an issue at first with our legal at our university said that badges might violate FERPA, I think, which was weird. But I haven't revisited it since then. So have you? Did you say that you do that?
yeah, not in my post-secondary world, but in my not-for-profit world. We do a lot of workshops, and so we assign badges once they complete a workshop, right? And so we find that people like the idea of a leaderboard, who has the most badges as checkpoints. But I haven't played with it yet in my post-secondary world. And I work with, I kind of have two groups of students. I have more mature learners, and then I also have kind of that 20-year-old range. And I think the 20-year-olds especially would respond to that, because it's kind of part of their thinking and their world. But I'm just curious how to integrate them in a way that's meaningful, right? And not just about the competition part of it, because that's, I don't want the focus just to be on I got a badge. It's like, well, what did you learn to get the badge, right?
So
Yeah.
the one thing
like
I'd
that.
say on that, I guess I mean I like the idea because they are highly competitive. They're almost like a gamified world, that the younger, I would say under 30, kind of generation. But one of the things that I think we've also seen as a problem of, say, like social media, is that their identity becomes often tied to how many likes they're getting. I mean, that's quite a problem, and quite literally that's it. We were asking someone, what do students want to know these days? I mean, what do they want to learn? What are they, when they're in college, and the response was always they want to find out who they are and whether people like them. And that's it. That's, so if you tie it to the badges and it starts to feel like some people are getting tons of badges and other people aren't, it could be like getting lots of likes and not likes. So I think that would be the thing to think about as you're framing it, is making sure that you frame it in a way that remains positive regardless.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
That's wild. I didn't realize that. That's what that's where their brains are. Oh, wow. Okay. Well, thank y'all. Any other questions? Well, we appreciate you spending time with us.
Thank you.
Yeah. So thank you so much. On behalf of the Muscogees Cultural College, we